Taking a cruise is the dream of many people, and due to the number of attractions offered, this desire is totally understandable. In addition to the beautiful view of the sea, cruise ships offer a multitude of attractions such as shows, water parks, casinos, and even spas. But while passengers enjoy all that is offered on these ships, behind the deck, there are many things that are not as public as the fun part. In this video, I will show you how this industry became so big and how it operates, destroying the environment, exploiting workers in poor countries, and even serving as a stage for crimes. Shipping is the oldest means of transportation used by mankind. According to scholars, our ancestors learned in prehistoric times to use logs, bamboo, and reeds to build canoes and boats to cross seas and lakes. Over thousands of years, navigation evolved slowly, and it was not until the Middle Ages, about 600 years ago, that a great leap forward was made with the naval engineering of mainly Portugal and Spain. Thanks to this advance, previously unknown continents were connected, and the sea ceased to be an insurmountable obstacle for man. The new ships marked the beginning of a new era, which came to be known as the Age of the Great Navigations, or simply the Age of Discovery. However, the voyages were dangerous, with poor conditions for the crew, as the ships were mainly used for exploration and the transport of goods. Ships did not become a common means of passenger transport until the 19th century, after the invention of steamships. With the use of engines, travel became faster and safer, and in 1817 the Black Ball Lines launched the first regular shipping line, connecting New York and Liverpool with departures on fixed dates. The first lines were intended to carry passengers, mail, and cargo, as had been done before in shipping. It was not until around 1880 that some companies began to offer different voyages, the purpose of which was leisure and entertainment on board ship. Although there were some such voyages by British and American companies, it was in Norway that cruising became a business. Norwegian shipping companies began to offer regular trips to see the beautiful fjords that exist in the country. At that time, the trips were made in adapted ships, as the first purpose-built ship was not built until 1900 in Germany. The emergence of cruise ships changed the world of passenger shipping, and ships in general that were dedicated to transporting people began to be more and more luxurious, with swimming pools, restaurants, and various activities for regular customers. However, with the evolution of aviation, ships eventually lost space, and almost all the companies disappeared. Those that survived had to adapt, and little by little ships went from being a means to reach a destination to becoming a desire, and even the destination of a trip. The fact is that the cruise industry has grown rapidly, especially in the United States, where companies have begun to offer trips to the famous Caribbean. Today, cruises have become one of the main segments within the leisure travel and tourism sector, moving more than $18 billion in 2022 alone, and with an even greater growth forecast for the coming years. But behind so many positive figures and the luxury of the ships, there are a series of irregularities and even allegations of slavery. With the growth of the cruise market and the evolution of the shipping industry, ships have become larger and larger, and today, by comparison, almost any ship carries twice as many passengers as the Titanic could carry. And although there are ships with a capacity of almost 10,000 people between passengers and crew, most ships carry an average of 3,000 people. This number of passengers generates more than 100,000 liters of wastewater and almost 1 million liters of dirty water from showers, sinks, laundry, and dishwashers every day. Much of this waste is disposed of directly at sea, polluting the marine environment with chemicals, viruses, and bacteria. Most countries where ships dock have laws prohibiting the discharge of sewage near beaches. In the United States, for example, where half of the world's cruise ships dock, the law states that all sewage discharged within 3 miles of the coast must be treated. However, outside this radius, sewage can be discharged untreated. In a few places along the Pacific coast and in Alaska, the U.S. also banned discharge over a larger area. In this case, companies were required to store waste accumulated during the voyage for discharge at ports. However, The Guardian report published in January shows that companies are taking advantage of Canada's looser laws and using the country's coastline as a toilet. And there's more. Cruise ships are now considered floating cities, with a population larger than that of many municipalities. The comparison also applies to pollution. since a cruise ship pollutes as much or more than many cities. To move this gigantic structure, you can imagine how much fuel is needed. And since we are talking about a business where companies need to maximize profits, any discount on fuel makes a big difference to the company's cash flow. For this simple reason, companies use heavy fuel oil, which is considered a residue from the oil refining process. This fuel is the cheapest fuel available, but it is also the most polluting. According to an article on the Business Insider website, the ships of the largest company in the sector, Carnival Group, alone, emit more sulfur oxide in a year than all the cars in Europe in the same period. And speaking of Carnival Group, Princess Cruise Lines, a company belonging to the conglomerate, received in 2017 a fine of more than $40 million for using a device that became known as a magic tube to dump the ship's oil waste directly into the oceans. The fine, considered the largest in history, apparently did not serve as a lesson, since only 2 years later the company was fined another $20 million for environmental offenses. The irregularities reported so far affect the planet as a whole, but because they are covered up by the glamour of luxury travel, they go unnoticed by passengers. But when it comes to public health, outbreaks caused by viruses, in addition to directly affecting tourists, can put an end to those vacations that have been dreamed of for years. Putting so many people in the same place and all with the same food source creates the perfect environment for the proliferation of a stomach virus called norovirus. Under these conditions, norovirus spreads rapidly, to the point that the virus is popularly known as the cruise ship terror. For companies, outbreaks are disruptive to business, and many companies attempt to withhold information from customers, or even distort information regarding contamination. As an example of this, during the coronavirus pandemic, Norwegian Cruise Line, the third largest in the industry, told its customers that the virus only spread in the cold, and that, when taking a Caribbean cruise with the company, the most they would have to worry about was sun protection. Despite the company's attempts to hush up the cases, CNN reported that there had been 13 outbreaks of norovirus in the United States alone in the past year, the highest number in a decade. Obviously, those on vacation need not worry about anything, as the most important goal in these cases is simply to relax. But it is worth knowing that cruise ships are the scene of numerous crimes, including murder. Around 400 people have gone missing on ships in recent years, a relatively low percentage compared to the number of people who have traveled in all those years, but worrying nonetheless. An investigation by a German newspaper has indicated that cruise ships can be considered a veritable paradise for people intent on murder. The impunity of these criminals is due to several factors, such as the fact that many deaths are considered suicides, as the bodies thrown overboard are often never found, making investigations and evidence collection difficult. Another important factor of impunity for both criminals and companies is the use of the flag of convenience by cruise lines. To save taxes and avoid stricter laws, companies register their ships in countries that offer tax and legal advantages. It is no coincidence that we see ships of US or British companies, for example, sailing under the flags of countries such as Liberia, Panama, Bahamas, and many others. The reason is astute. In this case, any crime occurring on the high seas must be investigated by the authorities of the country in which the ship was registered, and, for this reason, the investigations often come to no conclusion, and the victims' families in many cases cannot even sue the company. The use of flags of convenience also opens a huge loophole for another type of crime, common on cruise ships: the exploitation of workers. The offer of a job that allows you to travel the world and earn dollar wages with no expenses seems very attractive. But the reality faced by many workers is very different from what they dreamed of. The working day on board can reach up to 14 hours a day, and many workers, especially those of lower hierarchy, work without weekly rest. In this respect, once again, companies benefit from registering their vessels in other countries, as they follow the legislation of the country where they are registered. A US company, for example, that registers a ship in Liberia does not have to pay its employees the US minimum wage or respect labor laws. And to fill the jobs, the companies also go to great lengths. According to a report by German television Deutsche Welle, there were 544,000 workers of 80 different nationalities working in the sector in 2019. The majority come from developing countries, and about 30% of the workers are Filipinos. Although wages are lower than European and US standards, for workers from poor countries it is a wonderful opportunity to earn more and save money, so many submit to the conditions imposed. Another country supplying cheap labor to industry is Cuba. This Euronews report presents various evidence of a partnership between the country and MSC to hire Cuban workers. The agreement is concluded directly with the Cuban government, which appropriates 80% of the salary, and also applies severe punishments to workers who leave the job before the end of the contract. All of the allegations are serious and show a side not usually associated with luxury cruise ships. Showing facts like these, therefore, helps to raise consumer awareness, and, in a world where more and more people are choosing responsible companies, also makes the companies themselves rethink their practices. And this, to some extent, is already happening. The industry's image was badly shaken during the COVID pandemic, when images of ships packed with passengers, many of them infected, swept the world. During this period, the industry suffered its worst period, and the shares of the major companies plummeted. In a scenario of uncertainty and with a compromised reputation, it was difficult to think of the industry's recovery in the short term. However, according to data from the Cruise Lines International Association, from this year onwards, the number of passengers should return to pre-pandemic levels, and from 2026, the industry should grow at around 12% per annum. The association also announced the industry's plans to reduce the pollution generated. According to the statement, the goal is to gradually reduce carbon emissions to zero by 2050. More than half of the ships under construction will be equipped with gas engines, which reduce CO2 emissions by 25%. Companies are also reaching agreements with port authorities to use port electricity while at berth to eliminate the need to keep the ship running and reduce pollution in port cities. Waste treatment is also the order of the day, and more ships are being fitted with sewage treatment plants to prevent raw sewage from being discharged directly into the oceans. For the time being, changes are focused on climate issues, as companies fail to acknowledge labor rights violations and other problems occurring on ships. For these plans to really take off and the industry to change completely, it takes authorities and consumers like you and me to do our part. The best thing to do is to investigate before contracting any service. Know what is behind the business and always choose the company that presents the best practices. If you like this video, you will surely like this one. Just click. Thanks to everyone who has joined us this far. See you in the next video.